What class makes you think of fantasy? No doubt some of you are probably think of wizard or sorcerer, maybe another mage type character. For me, I think of Aragorn. I mean Ranger. I'm not sorry. One of the reasons why I think of Ranger is that it captures that element of fantasy that I personally really enjoy. The element of exploration and adventure, going into the wilderness and seeing the unknown. Or at least it attempts to do that. Kind of. Sort of. For you see, my dear viewers, I started the hobby not necessarily when the dinosaurs walked the earth, but certainly when the woolly mammoths did, with Pathfinder 1st Edition, which was a game that was so close to D&D 3.5 that it was jokingly referred to as 3.75. Now, here's the thing. Ranger in that edition and game functioned very similarly to the 5th edition Ranger, at least regarding their core class abilities of that of favorite terrain and favorite enemy. In 5e, the Ranger can effectively choose a specific enemy type or terrain and get various bonuses toward that enemy or respective terrain. For an enemy, it's usually advantage in tracking or recalling knowledge about them, and then terrain, you more or less get a temporary expertise regarding that terrain, as well as additional other bonuses, such as can't be tracked or get lost, fun things like that. In 3.5, again, functioned very similarly. You got a static bonus, specifically a +2 to all things regarding the monster and all things regarding the terrain. This also included attack and bonuses. The bigger difference is that in 5e, you typically choose a different type every time you get that ability. In 3.5, it could stack. Also, you automatically got an animal companion at 4th level. This is why Vex is seen with her bear trinket in Vox Machina, because they started with Pathfinder 1st Edition. So when converting over to 5e, Vex was made a Beastmaster Ranger in order to keep her beloved bear, and no doubt when converting from one game to another, she probably got hit the hardest regarding how her favorite terrain and favorite enemy functions. So with these factors in mind, if you were playing a Ranger in 3.5 and you knew that the campaign was going to be a dragon hunting campaign that focused on going into the mountains, then you as a Ranger player could focus on dragons and mountains, which then would give you an insane bonus to not only to attack and hit, but also the various skills relating to those class abilities, which really led into the fiction of the Ranger being not just a warrior of the wilderness, but also a monster hunter. But let's hold on a second. Did you catch something that I said in the paragraph prior? And you knew. Yeah, many would state that one of the biggest issues, if not the issue with the Ranger, is that not only are the class abilities incredibly situational, but it is almost reliant on meta knowledge in order for the class to function properly. Now, that being said, if you were to tell your players that yes, we are doing a dragon hunting campaign that's going to be focused in the mountains, that can more or less be given as the pitch of the campaign to set a proper expectation, which players can then use to write into their backstory as to why they would be hunting dragons and potentially going into the mountains. Now, that is, in a way, also acting on meta knowledge. So, really, in my mind, there's not a lot of difference. It's a way of helping your players incorporate their character into the campaign. So is this the core issue with the Ranger? I would say it's an issue, but it's not the core issue with it. The Ranger, you see, seems to have a lot going on, but very little output. It is pretty good at fighting, but not as good as fighting as the fighter or even paladin or barbarian, so it has a little bit of fighter in it. It has very limited expertise with its favorite terrain, and then, well, its spells feel very druid-like, so it's a lesser druid. There's a real identity crisis going on within the Ranger because it has so much going on and so much potential but very little output that it's hard to nail down exactly what Rangers specifically are. And this is something that I think the 3.5 Ranger did kind of well, but still had the very same issue.
Just play a fighter with a bow, it's way better.
Is there any way to make the Ranger better? Well, believe it or not, Wizards of the Coast has legitimately tried twice. Specifically in 2016 with the Revised Ranger, which is actually a very solid upgrade, specifically regarding their favorite enemy. You see, you get that +2 to attack and damage back, and you get a very small list to choose from on the initial outset, plus all the additional perks of advantage in tracking. But then, at 6th level, you get the Greater Favorite Enemy, where the list opens up even more and that +2 increases to a +4. So it really feels like you are advancing. This is really a solid update to the class. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a good one. And honestly, I wouldn't mind if 1D&D just ripped this whole hog. But spoiler alert, they're not. Yeah, how 1D&D operates is much closer to the Tasha's Cauldron of everything with Favorite Foe, which Favorite Foe isn't bad. It does a d4 additional damage when you target a specific creature or mark them, but the downside is that it operates like concentration, which means you can't stack it with Hunter's Mark, so basically, I'm just gonna use Hunter's Mark all the time, really, which leads to why 1D&D did what it did, because they just made it Hunter's Mark effectively, but you lose all the abilities to track your favored enemy. I mean, what's the point with this? I mean, later on down the line, we get the one that helps us to avoid exhaustion and things like that. Is that supposed to mirror Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli chasing after the Uruks in Two Towers? I mean, well, you wanna know what else he was doing? He was tracking! Yeah, okay, let's briefly talk about the 1D&D Ranger, because it just sucks. It takes a lot of the things that are wrong with the current Ranger and then amplifies them tenfold. It removes the whole idea of tracking a monster down and just boils it down to where you can always do Hunter's Mark on a specific enemy. That's boring. That is a very boring ability. One of the best parts of Favorite Enemy was not only getting additional bits of knowledge about that enemy, along with things about terrain and all that fun stuff, but was the ability to track better. It's what made them really feel like not just nature's warriors, but monster hunters. I promise that is the last one. Which, if you haven't picked up already, is honestly what I think is the core issue with the Ranger. It lacks a sense of an identity. And because of that, the mechanics kind of get confused as to how it wants to reflect that narrative, because, again, there's a lot going on with it. It seems to want to emulate Aragorn, but doesn't know how to do that really well. Truthfully, when I read The Blood Hunter, I got more of what I fell in love with about the Ranger than, well, 5th edition's Ranger. Even though Blood Hunter is an unofficial class, and honestly I'm not saying that the Blood Hunter should replace the Ranger, it just seemed to capture the fiction that I've loved about this specific class. And it has an identity. What is a Blood Hunter? You know it. I'm not gonna say it because I don't want another trailer to pop up. But you get it. The way to fix the Ranger is to really nail down the fiction. I've seen some ideas floating around that Rangers should be put as a subclass to Fighter, and honestly, that's one that I don't disagree with, especially if you really wanted to lean into the fantasy of Aragorn, because Aragorn does come across more as a nature fighter, aka nature's warrior, but what if we leaned into the element of them being more like witchers? And then them going into the wilderness to help people, to hunt things, have fun like that. Nailing down the fiction, nailing down the story of the class, I think could honestly do wonders. So if you made this far into the video, let me know how you would solve the Ranger problem. And please, no, delete the class entirely. Very unoriginal. And with that, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Keep being awesome. Keep rolling those dice.